Well, today, everyone, I've got Sarah Jansel with me. She is the CEO of Jansel and Company, where she and her team build, brand, and grow awesome websites, both on Spotify, and Kajabi. And she's actually known as the Spotify Queen. I love that. She is also a speaker, podcaster, and columnist for several different publications. And Sarah has accomplished all this after a long, very successful corporate career, over 20 years in leadership roles for companies like PwC, Scotiabank, and even rising to a very high level at CarFax Canada. So, Sarah, though, today is going to give you a brief overview of how she ended up starting her own business, kind of that progression. And also, we're going to dive into her conversations that she talks about in her whole availability as a speaker, because I think some of those conversations, all those fears that hold us back, or I really want to hear more about your 4 beliefs. I thought that was great. And I think it's going to be beneficial, Sarah, not just for me, obviously, but for all our listeners. What are those 4 beliefs? So why don't we dive right in? But welcome.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Welcome,
Thank you
welcome.
so much for
Yeah.
having me. I'm excited to be here,
Oh,
Sherry.
good, good. Glad
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
you. So tell us a little bit about, this long corporate career and, how that transitioned to starting your own company.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So definitely 20 years in corporate before making the leap. So, some of my beliefs that we'll talk about later about it's never too late to change,
Mhm.
really played into over the years whether or not I thought I could, having pursued, one particular dream career and kind of getting there and realizing maybe this isn't really what I want to do, for
Mhm.
the rest of my life. So, decided to pivot. But yes, I spent 20 years in corporate, banks, consulting firms, the whole 9 yards. Worked my last role working for CarFax, which was incredible as their head of people and operations. So I did a lot of things with their real estate and obviously anything that touched humans. So that's a really ingrained in everything that I
Yeah.
do today, even in my own company and with clients and things like that. So,
Okay.
it was really great training. I was just joking with somebody else earlier today that I feel as though over those 20 years, I trained like an Olympian for that corporate career.
Oh,
you
wow.
know,
That's a
did a
great,
lot of things.
yeah,
Yeah.
analogy. Yeah, I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, to get to the place that I did, whether it was schooling or whatever it was.
Mhm. Mhm.
But there was one thing that continued to pop up for me over and over and over that 20 years that I would kind of think about a little bit, but sort of talk myself out of, which
Mhm.
was, a long time ago, when I was 16, my mom was ill. So I had a kind of an unfortunate circumstance where I ended up on my own. So I had to very quickly figure out what I was going to do. And part of my keynote speech is, I kind of had 2 choices, like be homeless or, figure out how to be
Wow.
successful. And so I obviously did the latter,
Mhm.
not the former, and really pursued figuring out how I was just going to make everything work, and I had hopes and dreams and things like that and put myself through school and obviously had a great corporate career. And so there was no issue with kind of the path I pursued, except I had a lot of other ideas about what I wanted to do when that had happened, but had to sort of felt in that moment, like I had to kind of figure this out that I needed to pursue a route of safety and
Mhm.
security. And, that makes a lot of sense, even for a
Does.
16 year old,
It
right?
drives all of us, whether you're 16 or 60, I think.
Totally. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so it was really important to me. And that is what you see in a lot of the
Yeah.
things and a lot of the decisions that I made. But before doing that, creative industries were always really interesting to me. I loved art history. I did a lot of art. I was into portraits. I even considered doing, the forensic arts with portraits and things like
Oh,
that.
interesting.
Fashion played a huge role. My mom was really into fashion and hair. My sister was an esthetician. Like I was really brought up in a world where a lot of color and
Mhm.
things were really important. So I kind of had to park that, is how I felt
Mhm.
to move forward. And so what happens if there's anybody out there that's had that happen to them where something's happened and you're like, I'm just going to have to shelf this idea because I've got to figure things out, is I will guarantee you that those thoughts will continue to creep back in. The little feather in your ear that's like, hey, creative bone over here still needs to be scratched, still needing
Mhm.
something. And that's exactly what happened to me. So, after 20 years, I decided to just launch my own fashion company. I was like, I keep feeling like there's something I
Oh,
want to
wow.
do. I didn't necessarily feel ready to leave my corporate career. So I
Okay.
considered it a passion project. And it
Okay.
was, I'll put really big air quotations around side hustle.
Yeah.
And so I started a fashion biz, bringing the California vibes to Canada. So that was kind of my shtick. And it
Yeah.
was really fun. And what I didn't know doing that was just the world of entrepreneurship that it would ignite for me and get
Mm.
me really excited. So, I did that in 2018. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, I very quickly realized I was thinking about scaling that business at that point, still at my corporate
Okay.
job. And I realized that there were all these people around me that were also trying to get online. And one of the things I had done with my fashion business was learn everything I possibly could about Shopify, about how to get your business online, about, I'd done all the things. And so I was working with a coach who said, like, I have a couple people who need your help, like right now. Like, would you be willing to take them on? And I was like, well, I guess, like, yeah, am I
Yeah.
going to even
Yeah.
charge them?
Sign
Like,
me
I'm
up.
not really sure. Right.
Sure.
So I did take them on, and it was like the fuel to that little creative fire that I needed, where I realized,
Mhm.
okay, so this is the push I needed, because it was the perfect blend of the exciting kind of creativeness around the design, but it also had a lot of the things that I still loved about being in business. Just
Yeah.
I could make that a little bit different. So I made the leap. So that's kind of how that all came to be. And now, fast forward a few years later, we've had some twists and turns, but
Yeah.
here we are, helping a ton of clients get their businesses online.
So you actually left your corporate position during COVID? Did I
I
hear this
did.
right? Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
You got
hired that coach in March, and
okay.
we were supposed to meet in person. So that obviously didn't happen.
Right, right. Yeah.
I think like March 18th or something crazy.
Hmm.
And so a month later, she was like, are you okay if we just pivot to virtual? And I was like, at this point, totally.
Let's go.
That
Let's
makes
go.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took my first client on in May, my second in June, and I felt the most uncomfortable I had ever felt in my life, because I
Oh
knew
wow.
what I needed to do, but I was
Hmm.
really afraid of being like making this jump, because I was like, I know this is what I need to do, and the consequence would be
Sure.
continuing feeling not lit up, by
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
it's not that there was anything wrong, it just wasn't fulfilling me. And so I resigned in July. So it all happened
Wow.
really quickly and left in the fall. Mhm.
So, just out of curiosity, what process did you go through? Because, the security side is obviously health benefits,
Oh, yeah.
you know how much you're getting every month, how much is going into your account. You got a 401k, life is pretty good. Um,
hmm
what was the process, or did you have a process that you went through to decide, A, do I really want to do this? Do I want to make the jump to entrepreneurship? And B, when do I do it?
hmm Yeah, that's a great question. And I tell a lot of people I felt really fortunate at that time that, I have myself, my husband, and my cat, so we don't have kids. And,
Mhm.
we live a pretty great life.
Mhm.
And so I didn't have a lot of, kids and things like that to worry about, and
Mhm.
had been putting money away for a while. And so I feel like maybe I was preparing without realizing I was
Oh, I love
preparing, if
that.
that's
Yeah.
fair. It kind of strikes me that at the time when I could have done it, I was kind of set up to do it. Now, I will say that's really fast. And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
looking back, could I have had a different plan or taken a little bit longer and figured out business structure and things? I probably could have. But to be honest, the excitement in me, and also the like, I know if I don't do this, I might not do this,
Yeah.
played a bit
Yeah.
of a role in that like sense of urgency. And I'll never forget giving the president of my company the letter, and he was not the least bit. He was surprised, that I was leaving, but he wasn't surprised, and he said to me, "God, you know." Like, if I had only done what you are doing right now when I was your
Yeah.
age. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
say there was a lot of thoughts I had around a lot of those things. And because they were ingrained in me, especially as an HR practitioner with benefits and pensions and all of
Right.
those things. But I was like, I just have faith that I'm going to find a different way to
Mhm.
reproduce and be even better maybe than I was,
Mhm.
in that place.
Really interesting what you're pointing out, because it's something a number of women that I have coached in the past have said, that you get to a point where you're making so much money or you have so many responsibilities, you have achieved a level of success that it's almost, they don't call it a golden handcuff, but it really is a
Hmm.
handcuff of benefits and comp and your package, so to speak, that keeps you from moving. And so and I think you're the president, CEO of CarFax, basically said that he got to a point where he couldn't make the
Hmm.
shift. Yeah, it's really fascinating. So talk about though those four beliefs, because and even how you evolved into, so you're building websites for other people, Spotify, Kajabi, all of this. When did you think, gosh, I have to tell my story, I have to share my four beliefs, and I want you to share those with everyone today if
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely someone who's never been afraid of the stage. So I will say,
Oh, I love that.
definitely been speaking for a while. And, kind of, I mean, in my job, I had to do that anyways, get up in large
Okay.
groups of employees
Oh.
and, speak at events, or, people would be like, oh, you're the VP of this. Can you come speak to our column or things like that? So I think I got the reps in early, which was really nice.
That Olympic
Um,
training, right?
that Olympic training, it really helped me.
Yeah.
And, I would say though, I think a lot of people who hear, because I'm really just starting to come out and tell most of what I've shared even here at the beginning about kind of what happened to me over the years.
Mhm.
Because when that happened to me and I started to get into, okay, well, I got to figure out how I'm going to finish high school and how I'm going to get a job. And now it's about college
Incredible.
and then do my MBA and like all the things. I
Mhm.
didn't tell people what I was going through. And so people
Mm.
didn't really know about that. And most of that came from a place of feeling fearful that I would be judged or fearful that people would think, gosh, like, is she really going to make it? And I was like, I didn't want anything to burst my bubble of like, no, I'm going to figure this out
Mhm.
and be really determined about it.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I think over the years, that was a disservice to me
Mhm.
because, I don't want to use the word conceal because I feel like that sounds like I
Mhm.
deliberately didn't tell people, but I was so focused on the steps I was taking in front of me, the
Mhm.
things that I wanted to achieve, that I just didn't want to feel like I felt like that would interrupt my flow,
Mhm.
if that makes
No,
sense.
that makes perfect
Yeah.
sense, because sometimes those are the sad parts that we all hold inside of us,
Yeah.
the fearful parts. And sometimes if we face them, then they're right in the room with us and we're terrified.
100%.
That's gonna stop it. That's gonna stop us, because we're going to
Hmm.
be that 100%. Um,
Definitely.
yeah,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
really
And there's a little
interesting.
saying that I used to say, and it'll come out in my speech as well, which is, this isn't my life. Like this little voice in my head when things would kind of get rough and I'd be looking around going, like, this isn't my life. This isn't actually what I'm building here. So I felt there was a lot of, okay, how do I move forward?
Yeah.
Not backward. It felt backward for me, but becoming an entrepreneur, it was like some of those things resurfaced. And, I started to
Mm.
realize when, I was working with coaches or I was talking to people about, connecting with others, that I was starting to feel like the person that I was. So the creativity part, it was just like the tip of the iceberg. And it was like, now I felt like I needed to talk about it or I needed to tell people. And it comes from a place of realizing in the business that I'm in that there are so many incredible people. There's so many incredible women that we work with who are doing such amazing, innovative things. And they're sitting there telling themselves that maybe I shouldn't do this or maybe I can't do this. And I thought, oh my God, like I'm sitting on, all of this adversity and things and challenges that we've all faced that. But maybe if I told my story, even if it just helped one person to see, you can climb that mountain,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
hill or whatever it is that's in front of you, then I really felt like that to me, I would feel like I made a difference. I was like, I'm kind of sitting on this and feeling selfish, if that's fair.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah. So last year I decided that I was going to start to talk about this. I hired a coach on, creating speaking like a business. And I've got my keynote. I'm having an event actually in May where I'm going to be giving that. I was like, you know what? I'm even going to throw my own event here. We're going to get out there, fill a room with some incredible women and give that speech. And I am going to be talking about the 4 beliefs that I believe and have used throughout my life and career that have instantly changed the trajectory of my success or kind of snapped me out of moments when I might have been talking myself out of things that I should just do anyway.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, this is incredible. This is good stuff because I'm going to go backwards just a little bit when you said I'm sitting on something that actually could be helpful for others. So many entrepreneurs or people who are trying to achieve something only look at the successes at the end result. They don't look at, and I fall into this all the time. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
about where anybody was that I think is a success in a field that maybe I want to pursue. I don't think about what were they like, 5 years ago. Well, what was that trajectory? And I'm more like the 5 years ago than who they are today. So I love that you are willing to talk about what sounds like an incredibly difficult young adulthood,
Yeah,
and
quick one.
stayed focused. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So jump into those beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So there's really 4, and they're just my personal feelings on things. The first one I feel really passionate about because I see this a lot with a lot of the people we work with, especially women. And the first belief is that the ceilings we break through are our own. And why I feel this way is a lot of times, and I did this over the years, right? We put ourselves in a box and we believe that we can't be the things that we want to be or achieve and do the things that we want to
Mhm.
do for any number of reasons. And
Mhm.
like me, at first, external factors played a very key role. And there was some serious legitimacy to the reasons why I didn't pursue creative. However, as time went on, it became more and more difficult to convince myself that that was the case until the
Mhm.
point where they call it the feather and the brick. Like the feather tickled me over the years. And then it was kind of like the brick hit me that, like, I can't really ignore this anymore.
Mm.
And so I believe that this is true for a lot of people, especially women, where, there are always going to be external factors, but what is within our control? And there is some real science. I started getting really into some science behind belief, and that kind of led me down a path with this. And there's this gentleman, he's a scientist named Albert Bandura, if anybody's ever heard of him. And he
Okay.
spent his life and career studying positive psychology and self efficiency. And one of the things that he talks about is how it is actually a scientific fact that if you believe you can, the chances that you like truly believe you can do something, and like you think about Olympians and things like that and
Mhm.
visualization,
Mhm.
if you truly believe you can do something, the likelihood that you will do it is almost always that you will. And also, not just yourself, but if you are surrounded by others who also have this belief in you, even better.
So that brings in community, even who we
Mm-hmm.
choose to spend our time with, who we hire to
100%.
help us. Yeah.
Yes.
What we
Yes.
watch,
Yeah.
what we
What we
listen to.
watch.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
like sponges, right? We're absorbing that.
Yeah.
So that really hit me. That was huge. And I was like, I
Mhm.
didn't really realize there was a whole science to this, but there is.
Mhm.
So there's some legitimacy behind, what's going on in your mind and how
Yes.
that's feeding into your physical reality.
Oh, fascinating. I love how just the visual you presented that the ceilings that we bust through are really ceilings that we create
Hmm.
for ourselves. We set them
Yeah.
up. I can't do this. I'm too old. I'm too poor. I'm too fat. I'm too skinny. I'm too this. I'm too that. Whatever it
Yeah.
might be. It's too late. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And we
interesting.
have all these
Mm.
breakthroughs in life. It's not like we don't have evidence that we can do things. It just, we're really hard on ourselves.
We are. So did you sometimes have to go back and remind yourself of your accomplishments along the way to
Oh gosh, yeah, it's true. Like I would say like daily sometimes, especially
Mhm.
even being an entrepreneur. I know I've been interviewed by other people who have asked me about this, and I say it's almost like I felt like when I left corporate, this is a really good example, that I knew nothing anymore. It was
Oh,
like I had forgotten everything I learned because being an entrepreneur was so new and I was
right.
second guessing myself. And it was like, wait a minute. No, these things
Mhm.
are supposed to feed into the other things. It's just that this is new and it's uncomfortable. So I'm talking myself out of it again. So I would say it comes up all the time. I don't think any of us can, even though I believe these things and they serve me and I come back to them, the
Mhm.
reality is that I need to come back to them on a regular basis. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that discomfort, oh, this is uncomfortable, or I don't know how to do this, is your first kind of clue that you need to spend some time reflecting back on, oh gosh, I do, to reaffirm your belief in your own abilities that are far
Yeah.
beyond the ceiling you've created. Yeah. So
100%.
discomfort is not something to run from, but to run towards and figure out what's going on there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. There's like
Love
the
that.
discomfort in your head and the discomfort in your gut. And I try to
Oh,
discern the two where I'm like, the one in my head that's trying to talk me out of this is probably the protection mechanism. So I need to ask it some more questions. Whereas the one that's in my gut might be like, oh, I have a feeling that I should listen to my intuition in here. And I think they're different.
interesting. Oh my. Yeah. Oh, so give us an example of one maybe in your recent time period, where your head's like, forget it, don't do this, Sarah. And your
Yeah,
gut
I would
is going,
say
meow.
definitely. I was, I've been, and it's funny, I'm like, I'm in, I had a career in HR
Yeah.
structure. I have a team, there's like, 6 different people I work with on a regular basis.
Right.
And I had made some changes. We had some people kind of change hours and things like that. And I was really humming and hawing as things have been getting busier and busier. That I'm like, I really do need to bring on somebody full time who can be my person and work with this person. And all of the logic told me that, of course, this is the right thing to do.
Mhm.
But the fear was like, oh, maybe not yet. Let's get some more evidence. Let's make sure. Let's take our time. Let's not rush into things. And, sure enough, a couple of months later, it was very clear to me that it was like, okay, yeah, like now my hair is on fire and we definitely need to do this. And I should have made this decision 3 months ago. So I did make it. I will say I did make the decision. I'm so excited that this person is going to be full time with me now. But, and it's obviously the very right decision. As soon as I made that decision, like my shoulders even relaxed physically.
Wow.
Like I just knew this was the right thing. But even up until that moment, it was like, okay, but all the what if scenarios. Well, what if something goes wrong? Well, now I
Mhm.
feel really responsible for this person. Well, I
Mhm.
just want to make sure everything's perfect. And, it was all the stories we tell
Right.
ourselves. So, I mean,
Right.
it's a small example in just a daily life, but I think these things come up all the time, big or small.
Yeah, they do. It's a great example though, because we often think, I think that's the rabbit hole we sometimes go down, or whatever the phrase is, where I should be able to do all of this. If
Mhm.
even the example of Shopify setting, let's say you wanted to set up a business with Shopify. If you're not techie, oh, I should learn this and then I can launch my business. Well, you know, there's a long
Yeah.
trajectory, in my case, anyways, of learning how to do this. So maybe I need to hire someone in contrast.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A
Okay.
hundred
So
percent.
belief number two, where are we?
Belief number two. So in business and life,
Hmm.
resourcefulness is always key.
Oh, wow. I
And
don't,
so oh,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I don't hear that very often. And that is so right. Mm.
And what I will say about this is obviously from a young age, I sure didn't have it all figured out.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
sure didn't have all the education. There were
Mhm.
lots of things, lots of the hills to climb there. But what I did have was my ability to figure things out. And I relied on that. I'm going to call it street smarts just
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
simplicity. But what I would say is it was a muscle that I flexed over the years because there were a lot of things that I needed to figure out and do. And I had a lot of hopes and dreams. And, I wanted a career and, I got into the bank and okay, then I really like this job. How do I get to the next thing and things like that. And I will say I was probably always the up and comer that might
Yeah.
have looked polished, but didn't have the experience, but did have the willingness and the know-how to be like, I don't have the answer for you right now, but I will go and figure that out. And come heck or high water, that I was back there trying to figure it out. And a lot of times in life and careers, I got opportunities that I will be honest, probably I had no business getting in some capacity. But the reason that I did was because people felt confident that I had the confidence that no matter what, I will figure this out. I will get the answer. There's always a solution, it's kind of glass half full, if you will. And I believe everybody has this muscle from a very young age, even as children, right? You
Mhm.
want something, you had to learn how to say the thing you wanted for your mom to give it to you, right?
Right.
So, as if you keep flexing that muscle, that confidence will come there. So it becomes less about, oh, what I don't have these things and more about, but if I figured it out, would that work for you? Most people will be fine with that answer. So that is a huge one, I think, for people to remember.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's tied into, excuse me, it's tied into a belief in yourself too, that I can figure this out. There's got to be whatever it is. There's answers, there's solutions, there's a process here. I can figure it out. And
Yeah.
just by saying that to yourself, it kind of shifts whatever the issue is. It shifts in your body rather than in contrast. I don't know that. I don't know how to do that. Oh gosh,
Yeah.
it's the end of the
Yeah.
world. Yeah. You
Throw
learned
a
that.
yet on the end. I don't know that yet.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. Well, and I bet you learned that in a significant way as a young adult navigating life by yourself. So
Yeah.
important. So number three.
The way that I've been approaching this,
Mhm,
I'm keeping,
mhm.
it's like the definition of insanity. I keep doing the same thing, getting the same result. Okay. So what can I do differently if I still want this thing? Or what am I willing to compromise on or try a different route on to help me achieve that? And here's an example of that. I can think back to my corporate career. And at this point, I was, gosh, 25, I guess. And I had finished college. And that was a huge win for me. And I was at the start, I was a manager, at one of the big banks. Like that was a really big deal. And I was at the point where I was trying to pursue a career in my field that I had studied, which was HR. And of course, I was volunteering. I was like, give me all the hard things to do, like I really want to prove myself. Like that was all good. But I literally went on 9 interviews in like 8 months. It's like every month or, less I was interviewing
Another
and people liked me, but I wasn't getting those jobs.
one.
And, so I was like, gosh, I feel like
What?
all the hard things that I did up until this point literally don't matter. Right.
Yes.
There's the brain telling you nothing matters.
Right.
I can't get past this. And it really frustrated me. And, I was trying to figure out, I was like, what feedback do you have for me on this? And they'd be like, well, we really like what you're doing and, keep doing what you're doing. But we're hiring people, that have more experience in doing some of the things that we're doing. And I'm thinking, gosh, this is like life's biggest catch 22. Like
It
you
is.
won't hire me to get experience, but I can't get the experience without you hiring me. So
Right.
like, now what, right? Like I'm pretty stuck. And I was at the point where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like give up. Like maybe this just isn't meant for me. And I thought, no, like of course, being as determined as I was because of some of the things that have happened to me, I was like, I'm gonna figure this out. And I decided, I took it to Google. I was trying to figure out, I was like, how could I get this experience that they keep saying that I need? And I landed on a company in town where I live, and they had an HR chapter for the city. And they run events and things that are for people who are HR practitioners and get their certifications. And I thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to volunteer for an HR, chapter and do this. So I spent my time and I did that. And one of the directors on that board really took a shine to me. And what I didn't know was she had her own business and was planning to leave. And I would say the community that was in that group that I was in with her was kind of like, you could tell people were just volunteering in some capacity to volunteer. But I was
Mhm.
like, no, I'm here.
To learn something. I
Like,
have a
what can I
purpose.
do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so 3 months later, she resigned, and the president and past president of the chapter approached me and said, well, we're putting your name forward as the new membership director. And I was floored. Here I am at 25. Again, no business probably with this, or
Mhm.
at least how I felt at the time. But I was like, absolutely, I'm going to be the best membership director you ever had if people vote me in. So I got in, and lo and behold, another job opportunity came up. And wouldn't you believe that because of this story that I told, I got the job. So it's, willing
Wow.
to go to a completely different place. I was literally like, I'm just going to throw this career on the shelf and pick something else kind of thing. But it just goes to show you, you can do something a little different. You
Yeah.
might get a different result.
But there's so many pieces to that particular belief that you just shared that I think is so interesting. Hitting that wall. How else can I do this? I don't care what it is.
Hmm.
As everyone knows, I run a magazine. How can I do the magazine differently? How can I create the structure, business structure of it differently? Or if someone says, I don't like my life the way it is, okay,
Hmm.
what needs to change? Where are the real problems? So sometimes it's almost like we have to, at least I have to do this, where I stand in the problem and actually physically turn around and say, look at it entirely different, Sharri. What
Yeah.
if? Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
it's really
Yeah.
cool. But also, you found the opportunity. That's resourcefulness, right? You found an
Yep.
opportunity that you weren't going to get paid for other than learning, number one, and also connections, community again.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. So how much of resourcefulness also, because in some of the information I had read on you, you talked about the value of community and building a
Hmm.
strong community and how important that is, especially probably for an entrepreneur. In a corporate setting, you build it within your corporate environment, but as an
Definitely.
entrepreneur, you have to leave your house. So
Yeah, you do. You do. It's not as easy, right? And
no.
it's so funny that you highlight that because I believe that intrinsically. Like it was easier for me to, we'll call it build community, but I would say it was like, networking and like, who am I talking to that's going to help make my job easier and I can
Mhm.
help make their job easier and things like that. So there was a very common goal, I think,
Yeah,
behind some
yeah.
of the corporate community that I had, and not all of the community, but I think, a good chunk of that. And also
Mhm.
your role, like people
Mm.
aren't going to tell you no in some cases, right? So
Yeah.
when you go out and all of a sudden it's you, it can be quite lonely. And so I had enrolled myself in a number of masterminds and,
Oh,
started connecting with
interesting.
other entrepreneurs, and even the graphic designer that I hired to do the logo for my fashion company. I went out for coffee with him and he's like, you have to meet my wife. She's a coach for new coaches. And it was like, one thing kind of led to another. And suddenly, as an entrepreneur, I will say I still have for sure some of my connections in corporate and people that,
Mhm.
I really established good rapport with that we just naturally click. But in I'll call it my new life, my new
Mhm.
entrepreneur life, my community has fully shifted because I'm now surrounded with people who are either going through some of the same things, or they're a few steps ahead of me, or they're building really cool things. And we're helping each other out in a completely different way. But I think, oh my gosh, it's so necessary. Even in the story that I told you,
Mhm.
yeah, I took it to Google and was doing all these things, but I was still staying connected with the hiring managers because I believe every no is the beginning of the next yes.
I love that.
Can't tell me no. You said no
Yeah,
for now, you know.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I heard about this other opportunity and ended up landing the one that I did through people that I was connected with. So I think you can't forget the power of the people who surround you that support you and how that plays such an important role.
yeah. And those even in the past that might seem, irrelevant in your next
Yes.
venture, but yet you don't know.
You
A
don't
graphic
know.
designer who has a wife who coaches new coaches, it's like
Yeah.
that
What are
you
the
don't
odds?
know. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I love there are no coincidences, right?
No, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So what about belief number four?
Yeah, so we're going to come full circle here to what we
Okay.
started to
Love
talk about
this.
in the beginning, which is that it's never too late to make a change.
Mm.
And I fully believe that whether you're looking at it from, but I've built this long 20-year career, and are people going to think I'm crazy for
Yeah.
building a fashion label now and leaving my job, or building a company from nothing, literally,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Those are all my own thoughts, by the way, nobody else's. And, or, you're just like, well, I'm 40 now, or I'm 50, or like whatever
Right.
the thing is, whatever
Right.
the reason that we're making to say, like, well, I couldn't possibly change course now. Take a different look at that, because in my story that I tell, the biggest thing for me was knowing, through those 20 years, I will honestly say, hand on heart, for 20 years, I did not feel like I wanted to go out and be an entrepreneur and do something creative. But I
Okay.
did know that creativity was missing for me.
Right.
And over the years, I kind of got really good at kind of shelving that. I thought, like, I don't have time for that. I'm building this. Go away. You're distracting me. I'm not going to make money at you.
Mhm.
I need to pay for college, whatever the reason was. But eventually, when I didn't have all those things that I needed to take care of, we'll say air quotes again, needed to take care of, it became really hard for me to not listen to that or come up with an excuse for why I wasn't doing it.
Wow.
And if you're somebody who's been feeling like that, and it's almost like, well, I don't even really quite believe myself right now, it
Mhm.
might be a
Mhm.
good time to take a look at that. And I will say also, my change in career and things like that, I will call that much more drastic, maybe than what some people need to do. I mean, it was something I felt I needed to do. But
Mhm.
sometimes the change is small. Like I did start doing it as like, my passion project on the side, right? And got
Yeah.
my feet wet and
Right.
started to feel comfortable. Sometimes it's about the one step that we take towards that thing. And like you said, things, don't just, they happen for a reason.
Mhm.
And I believe that one step forward leads you to the next thing that will lead you to the next thing, to the next thing,
Yeah.
without having the map or the compass that you think you need to figure it out.
Mhm.
That will just kind of naturally take you to the place that you need to be. But you got to have a little bit of faith that it's going to be okay to do that. So I
Yeah.
think we have to give ourselves permission. And I think COVID may have
Mhm.
helped with this.
Yes.
We're all sitting at home reflecting on the things that we really wanted to
Exactly.
do. And now we're a baker, an artist, or whatever, right? So I think that's
Right.
really helped, kind of change the needle, or, the dial a little bit.
Mhm.
But I do feel like, now things are kind of back, quote unquote, to normal and things like that. So it's easy to slip back into these patterns and say, oh,
Mhm.
that little voice I'm hearing in my head, that's just silly. I can't do that.
Yeah.
So, pay attention to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it relates. I love that you said, your situation or what your decision maybe was a little bit drastic, but it might be that you don't want to necessarily, you might be the woman that doesn't want to leave corporate, but doesn't want to be in that silo or that
Mm-hmm.
particular function area. They want to move, as you did, into HR as an example, or whatever it might be. Okay, so how do I make that change? That's something, that's an area, a function area that I'm fascinated with, and I think could be something that I really could add to my career and my life. So it can be all kinds of things. It can be a job change within a company or within a corporate setting. It can be becoming an entrepreneur, and the benefit of side gigs. What what did you learn by not waking up one day, without the side gig and just saying, I'm going to do this tomorrow?
Yeah.
What
I
was the
mean,
value of that side gig along
it's a
with
great
your corporate? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think it gave me my training wheels. Is that the best way to say it?
I love this. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I sort of risk-free got to kind of figure it out and have
Hmm.
fun and not
Hmm.
worry about a lot of things, because I still had stability that I needed. And what it did do, though, also through those training wheels, is started to give me evidence and proof
Mm.
that maybe I could do this, or maybe
Mhm.
this is a lot of fun, or, whatever the thing was that was going on at the time. Like, it opened up doors for me at women's events. I got to get up and speak because I hosted a big pop up shop. 300 women had to walk through at an event and get up and kind of welcome them. And just like things like that, where I was like, yeah, like why wouldn't I want to do these things? This is
Mhm.
exactly,
Mhm.
what I want to do. And it's funny because the fashion thing, I did that and it led me to the next thing, which was ultimately became Jansel and Co. And, I still kept the fashion thing on until last February. And then I wound it down because I was like, okay, as much as I love doing this, that,
Yeah.
Jansel and Co is really where my heart and my passion is. But I would have
Mm.
never gotten here if I hadn't have been willing to at least try to do that. So that wasn't my end path, but it was the
Yeah.
door.
Yeah. But isn't that interesting? So sometimes, whether it's your corporate career, as you were talking about, or your fashion business, sometimes we think I have to do this for the rest of my life, or this has to be the one thing I'm supposed to do. And it's not. That's what
Yeah.
you're telling me. It might just be a step.
Yeah. And I would say like the four beliefs are circular. So it's like I didn't
Mm.
think it was too late to be, to make a change, but then I was putting a ceiling on myself, right? So I couldn't break through that problem, but couldn't I just figure it out and be resourceful, right? Or find, were there things that I could research that might make me feel more comfortable about making a decision? And yeah, I probably hit some dead ends. I almost died on, tariffs and figuring out import and export, but I again used that resourcefulness to find someone who did that and was like,
Yeah.
okay, we found a way around this problem. Maybe I'm just going to go for it. Oh, is it too late to change? No, I'm going to jump for it. Right. And then the cycle continues. So I think we go through these things in larger and smaller capacities depending on
All the
the
time.
day or the hour
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
what season we're in. But, they're good things to remember, or I would say
Mhm.
triggers to ask ourselves questions when we're bumping up against things that we're like, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah. 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 That's really important, though, truly, to recognize that it's not like, Sarah, we get one belief, like I've got that all solid. Now I can move on to belief number two. What you're
Mm-mm.
telling me is it's fluid. You're going to be dealing with those four beliefs in a positive way on a regular basis, in
Yeah.
and out, no
And
matter how successful or your business is, whatever you're doing, it's there.
yeah, and
Yeah.
if you asked any strategic planner, like when I worked in corporate, we would
Hmm.
hire people to come in and facilitate us to do strategic planning and things. And I feel like these weren't the same words that those people would use, but we would go through, okay, well, what are some of the things that we think our company would be faced with? What are our ceilings?
Hmm.
Okay, so we're going to identify those problems. Great. Like that's like practical brain. And so, what could we do about those things? How could we be more resourceful and figure out other solutions? Like all of those things seem logical. And
Hmm.
maybe we go down a path and we're like, well, that's not going to work. Okay, well, we got to figure out something else. Right. And that
Yeah.
would have just been
Yeah.
normal. And, you would never feel like your company was too late because it would be do or die. Right. If our company
Right.
was going to fail because we identified something
Right.
or we were just going to get stuck here, we probably wouldn't. Right. So, if it's logical when you think about it in that capacity, why isn't it logical when we come to ourselves?
Business. Yeah. Yeah.
The
Or your own
emotion in the way,
life.
right?
Yeah. Even your life. It
Hmm.
could be that you're not dealing with the business, but you have all these same issues in life, your personal
Definitely.
life. Yeah. It's very
Definitely.
interesting. But making that shift, from corporate into entrepreneur, and now you've been an entrepreneur for a good while. What do you think is the greatest challenge that surprised you in being an entrepreneur, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah. So if there's anybody who's thinking about this, the one thing that I say is becoming an entrepreneur. I did not expect this. Becoming an entrepreneur was the biggest personal, not just professional as well, but personal development journey of my life.
Okay.
And, I come out and I talk about these things like it's, I'm great to talk about them now. Had you have asked me about these things 3 years ago, you would have had no idea. And it was because I wasn't ready yet. I hadn't thought through some of the things that I needed to deal with. And I think the reason I didn't deal with them is in my corporate life, I didn't really have to. There was
Mm.
safety and structure and
Yeah.
security, and I was rewarded, for doing certain things, and I was getting kind of what I needed there. I didn't really have to come out and feel like I needed to tell my story. I wish I had have. Actually, it probably would have
Mhm.
helped me, to be honest. But, there were a lot of things that I didn't really need to do, but then becoming an entrepreneur and wanting to build a genuine, company where you're making connections and, you're relating to other humans. And, I'm not out there just to sell a website to sell a website. I'm out there because I'm obsessed with something our client is doing that I think is amazing. And I want to get under the hood on what they're doing so I can help them make it that much better. Well, I had these aha moments that it's like, whoa, these places that our customers weren't ready to go to, but we were getting under the hood and saying, oh my God, that's a part of your story. Like, your thing is going to sell because people are going to connect with you on a completely different level that you haven't even expected, because that's so relatable. And you're like, really? Right. And so I had a few aha moments along the way that sort of led me to, okay, well, if I'm not prepared to talk about this, I'm going to have to find a coach or someone that's going to help me to do that. And that's totally okay. But I will say, as much as I thought I was getting into all the business fundamentals, it was the personal journey that has been the most surprising but rewarding, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, that is fascinating because I don't think anyone really talks about that. And yet, as an entrepreneur, our business is so much entwined with who we are and how we live our life every day.
Yeah,
It's not like you get in the car and go home and you get the opportunity to not think about it. It's around all the
absolutely.
time. And how could it not affect us? But yet, no one talks about that. So, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I think
Good. It's
I,
refreshing. We
it
all go through it.
is. It is. And also that our
Yeah.
stories, the world is changing in this from the standpoint that people like to know who they're doing business with and what is the story behind that person. I love
Hmm.
this. I really do. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This
Thank
was
you.
fabulous. And all of you, there will be all kinds of information on Jansel and Co. down in the show notes. So you can follow Sarah and possibly hire Sarah as a speaker. I would love to go to an event that you're talking at, Sarah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So thank you. I so appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.